Go for the pulls and the pools. Go for the oohs and the ahs. Go for the bubbles and the bubbly. Go for the story and the stories. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
What's good? What's good? What's good? Welcome back to another edition of Football 24/7. I'm your guy, Tone DeShields II, and I'm here with John McMullen. Man, oh man, oh man, John. So much to get into when it comes to these Philadelphia Eagles. OTAs have officially come to a bittersweet end, but nonetheless, we're here to talk about it, even though you guys were only there for 2 days out of or 2 sessions out of the 6, right?
Yep, 2 sessions out of the 6, and yeah, that's it. Small sample size. See you in late July from the Philadelphia Eagles. July, it's still tentative, but I believe July 25th is when players will report. And yeah, so June 8th. Until then, no more on-field work for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, I have to ask you, right? With all this downtime, what do you writers typically find time to talk about, right? Again, like OTAs is coming to an end. There's this really large layover time between OTAs and training camp. How do you usually spend this time, John?
Well, training camp's right around the corner, so you got all the preview stuff and all that. You got to start getting your ducks in a row for that. There's always, you go into more of a big picture mode, starting to preview the upcoming season. And there's a lot to talk about as far as new players, competition, things like that. So, even though this is the one actual lull period in the NFL calendar, that's what makes the NFL king. There's always something to talk about. And whether it's, league-wide, somebody like Dalvin Cook about to get released, there's always something to talk about.
Right. You've been covering this game a long time. I always speak about it. You're a veteran in this thing. I've always wanted to know, right? Given the fact that you're a journalist and you've been around the block, who's been one of your more favorite athletes to cover since you've been covering sports? I mean, you've covered basketball too, right? So, I mean, who's been one of your favorite athletes to cover in your esteemed career?
Well, there's a lot of them. I mean, just from the Eagles, the obvious ones. I mean, it's the people that have good stories. So whether it's they're entertaining, like Jason Kelce, somebody like that, who's very thoughtful in what he says. Those are the best. And we always say, if you're in this industry, it's changed a lot, but back when I started, I pride myself on objectivity. That's changed a little bit, but for the old school guys, we root for the story, right? I don't care who wins, who loses, but I hope it's compelling, and that's sort of what you root for. So anybody who's compelling, anybody who's interesting, if you're interesting and good, like Jason Kelce, that's like a perfect storm. But I remember Mac Hollins when he came in here, with just, loving reptiles and snakes and the interesting stories. I mean, that's the kind of stuff you root for more than, the cliche guy. Think about, if you're a movie fan, think about Bull Durham when Kevin Costner's trying to teach Tim Robbins the cliches to get through. That's what you don't want to hear. So that's sort of what we root for. So everybody's rooting for a win. Everybody's rooting for celebrations. We're rooting for a good story.
I can understand that, right? And you mentioned compelling stories. When it comes to this OTAs that just came to an end, the final one was today, the last one you guys had access to. What's been some of the more compelling narratives that you've been able to latch on to throughout this off season and OTA? Give me the good, the bad, the ugly from everything you observed today and everything you were able to observe throughout this all season.
Well, we had an hour and 40 minutes. So I think the bad is, we don't get to see nearly as much as what we typically get to see. So, and I think that's a disservice to the fan base. I said it this morning on the show, Birds 365. I mean, it's all fine and good. They don't want reporters there, but if reporters aren't there, fans don't get to see, don't get to hear what's going on. Simple as that. They obviously don't get to see it. So we're that kind of conduit. And in this spring, as I said, you're allowed to have 10 OTA practices. You're allowed to have 3 days of mandatory minicamp. That's 13. You have to open at least 1 day of OTAs per grouping. So, we would have been there in extra OTA practice, and we would have been there for all 3 days of a potential mandatory minicamp. A lot more information in that kind of atmosphere. Now, if you go way back to when there was more access than that, even, and now it's very controlled as well. Pre-pandemic, one of the things that's disappointing to me is the most interesting stories typically this time of year are about the players you don't know, the undrafted guys. And as I said, pre-pandemic, I mean, that's who I'd be talking to. The Joseph Nadas, the Ben Van Sumerens, guys, Eli Ricks, who goes from 5-star recruit to undrafted free agent. Those are compelling stories for the summer. We don't get to talk to those guys, locker room's not open like it was pre-pandemic. That doesn't open until the regular season. And we're only afforded the players that the PR department brings us. Now we can request certain guys, but I can request Eli Ricks to the high heavens. They're not giving us Eli Ricks because there's no guarantee he's going to be here when they get down to 53. So that's the kind of stuff that is missing today. And, this is probably too inside baseball, but I think fans would enjoy that kind of stuff.
Yeah, right. I mean, especially when you think about the fact that due to the lack of access to you guys, it kind of leaves a lot to be desired, and it leaves a lot left up to interpretation, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, the less you see of stuff, the more there is, sort of conjuring up in people's minds what's going on. Somebody asked me, I brought up Ben Van Sumeren. Somebody asked me, what have you seen of Ben Van Sumeren? Nothing. Nothing. What am I going to see of the guy?
So today, who were you able to see? Like, what were you able to observe, right? Because, you see all the posts on Twitter from guys posting, oh, this person caught an interception, this person had a deflection, this person threw a touchdown, this person caught a touchdown, so on and so forth. What stood out to you today from OTAs that maybe could be considered significant?
Well, as I always say, the Eagles, they don't do team drills and OTAs. Obviously, there's no contact. There's no contact allowed anywhere in the NFL. So you can kind of cross offensive, defensive linemen off the list because they're not involved. Essentially, all they're doing is individual work, technique work, fundamental work. So the 7-on-7 guys, the receivers, the backs, the quarterback, obviously, against the back seven on defense. So, Christian Ellis is probably the MVP of the spring. We were there for 2 practices. He had 2 interceptions. He had a great interception today on Jalen Hurts that was essentially a pick 6. It would have went for 6 the other way. He got first team reps today because Nick Morrow wasn't there. So, again, very small sample size. But when we were there, there's a guy who kind of stood out. A lot of veterans weren't there today. So, and remember, it's all voluntary. So, the starting corners, Darius Slay, James Bradbury, were not there. Avonte Maddox is hurt. As I mentioned, Morrow, the edge rushers, they're not going to be involved anyway, but Reddick, Sweat, Graham, they're not there. Kelsey, Lane, they're not. AJ wasn't there. So, you start. Devontae Smith was one guy who really stood out because, a couple reasons. One is he's really good, and 2, he's playing against backup corners. So, that's kind of easy pickings for Devontae, and he really took advantage of it. You can see his route running and how effective he is against corners that are not named Slay and Bradbury. And so you take it all with a grain of salt and try to gather as much. It is interesting that they continue to default to Boston Scott and Kenny Gainwell in the backfield, above DeAndre Swift and Rashad Penny. We'll see how long that continues into training camp. I don't think it's going to continue long. Sidney Brown continues to work with the 3rd team. We'll see how long that lasts, which I don't think will be long.
Why do you say that? Why do you think for Sidney Brown that won't be long?
Well,
what have you seen from him to think to assume that
it's not what I've seen, because we haven't seen much at all. It's that they have a significant need at safety, and he's talented. So you would think when the real bullets start flying, so to speak, he's going to move up the depth chart pretty quickly. And it to me, it'll come down to, is it going to be Reed Blankenship and Terrell Edmonds, or is it going to be Terrell Edmonds and Sidney Brown? So he's going to get an opportunity to compete. One of the interesting things today, because and again, they're not even in team drills, but Jason Kelsey wasn't there. Now, in training camp, because Jason's 35, he'll get, as he did last year, a lot of maintenance days. And that means he's not practicing. And when he's not practicing, what do? Because Cam Jurgens is supposed to be the right guard. So are you going to move Cam Jurgens in the center on those days? Or are you going to leave him at right guard so you can make sure he gets as many reps as possible at right guard to get him ready for the regular season? That to me is going to be an interesting story. And it becomes even more interesting because today Jason wasn't there and they put Cam Jurgens at center and they let Tyler Steen, the rookie 3rd round pick, play right guard. So that to me is going to be an interesting story. Is Cam so locked in that they don't care? He can move back and forth? Maybe, but
I'm glad you say that, because that's something I think about, right? With like you said, Kelsey's going to have the maintenance days. Then you have Cam Jurgens filling in for him at center. Automatically, that puts Tyler Steen at the right guard because that's what they're conditioning him to perform at. But one can naturally assume if Cam doesn't totally have a stranglehold on that position, right guard, could Tyler Steen essentially have a leg up on Cam Jurgens's, a leg up on that position battle between him and Cam Jurgens for that right guard spot?
No, because Cam is getting first team reps when Jason is out there. So it's going to be interesting to see how they handle it. when Jason is out there, Cam's the right guard. I thought because Brett Toth can play center, Cameron Tom can play center, and I thought, all right, Cam needs as much work as possible at right guard. It's really not that big of a deal to have those guys in at practice, even though you probably don't want to play them in games, but it's practice, right? Allen Iverson. It's practice. It would make sense to me to leave Cam at right guard. And if the worst happens and Jason gets hurt, and we know he's played in so many consecutive games, nobody thinks that's going to happen. But if it does, then you move him full time to center, and then you go forward that way. I was a little piqued by the fact that on the first day Jason wasn't there, because he was there last week. They moved Cam back to center, and they let Tyler Steen take the first team reps at right guard. I just thought it was kind of interesting to see how they handled it.
I mean, yeah, it is, because, again, with Kelsey being 35, he is one of the most vested veterans on this team outside of Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox, and those boys. He's logged in a lot of man hours on the football field. So I would naturally assume he would have more maintenance days than not. And then Cam Jurgens would be in the center spot, where Tyler Steen would be at that right guard spot. That's why I kind of feel like Tyler Steen could potentially maybe have an edge on him as far as getting the reps.
Well, now, I mean, look, until Cam's not on the first team, when Jason is out there, that's not going to be the case. It's Cam's, as of now, he's the starting right guard. Whether you want to call it the leader in the clubhouse, it's his job to lose, whatever you have it. Ultimately, I would be very surprised if he's not the starter week one, unless he completely, what's the bed during the summer. And that's, I guess it's possible, but I don't expect it. I mean, one thing, people are concerned about his size, because he's a little undersized to play guard,
right,
at least compared to what the Eagles typically want at that position. But I did note that, Lane Johnson spoke earlier this week, and talked about how strong Cam Jurgens is, and whether you want to call it country strong or whatever, he's a lot stronger than the typical 300-pound guard. It's funny, 300 used to be big, now it's small for a guard, but you could have Tyler Steen at 320, 330, and Cam's probably stronger. So then it all becomes, who's better with leverage, who's more comfortable. With Jeff Stoutland, it's always about angles and surfaces and finishing blocks the right way. So there's a lot of technique work, and Cam's got a full year ahead of Tyler in Jeff Stoutland University as well. So that plays a big part of it into it as well.
Were there any, you mentioned some undrafted guys earlier that you've had the chance to cover throughout your career. I'm curious to know, are there any undrafted guys that have piqued your interest as of late?
Eli Ricks is probably the biggest name. He got beat pretty badly today on a double move by Devontae Smith. Just really bit on it. Devontae got a long touchdown. I mentioned, how impressive Devontae was against backup cornerbacks.
There goes those startup costs again. Those startup costs.
Eli was one of those guys. He's probably Joseph Nada is, a big receiver. So I thought, maybe if the Eagles are looking for that Zach Pascal sort of presence, maybe he can show up, but he didn't really do much. Now, again, we're talking Last week we got 45 minutes. This week we got 55 minutes. No reps from, I think week 1, Ian Book and the third team got maybe 5 reps, 5 or less. He didn't get any today. It was all Jalen Hurts and Marcus Mariota. Tanner McKee still hasn't gotten a rep other than developmental periods. So I haven't seen him. I haven't seen Joseph Nada essentially because he's obviously on the third team. And yeah, we just haven't had the ability to look at these players yet. So that'll come in training camp.
You know, Nick Sirianni, along with the new linebackers coach, I think Kenny Gainwell spoke today. Jalen Hurts obviously spoke today. There were a lot of guys who had a chance to speak today to you guys, the media. And I'm curious to know, what were some of your largest takeaways from Sirianni's press conference, the new linebacker coach's press conference, Jalen Hurts' press conference? What are some of the biggest takeaways or some of the more key takeaways, something that piqued your interest throughout these press conferences that you were a part of today?
Well, real quick, the only 2 today were Nick and Jalen. The other ones were earlier in the week.
Earlier in the week. My apologies. You're right.
Kenny Gainwell, Boston Scott, Landon Dickerson, Lane Johnson, DJ Elliott, the new linebackers coach. But with Nick, it's always, this is the time where coaches kind of hold their breath, right? I mean, this is the time where June 8th to July 25th, that turns out to be the day. You're hoping you don't get that call that so-and-so got in trouble for doing something. So in between individual drills and 7-on-7s today, he gathered the whole team at midfield of the bubble. It was inside today because of the air quality issues. And he just, gave him the talk. It's like, if you're a parent, the talk. And that's every NFL coach has the talk in between the lull after typically it would be minicamp, but the Eagles don't have a minicamp. And, it's basically stay in shape, as he said, and don't get in trouble. And that's, how many ways can you say that? Well, as an NFL coach, you got to find out a way to get to 90 guys every year. Some of them who've heard it forever. But hey, I mean, the Eagles have done a pretty good job. They haven't had many issues over the years. And I think that has more to do with, picking the right people, picking the right players. But there have been issues. I mean, we always joke about it. Back when they did have minicamp, the day they left, it was Nelson Aguilar, Fletcher Cox, Connor Barwin got in trouble at a strip club in South Philly. Josh Huff got in trouble. People remember that, going over the bridge with a gun. Darryl Worley got arrested right in front of the NovaCare complex and got cut. So there have been a few issues, but not many. And when you compare it to the rest of the league, it's a good record. So, but you always worry about that if you're a coach. The interesting part of me is how much time the Eagles are taking off. Now, part of that is they had a long season, right? So, typically the players get more time off than the coaching staff. I've been told the coaching staff's getting almost 5 weeks off, which is crazy. Unless you start to think about, if you don't make the Super Bowl, guys are getting a couple weeks off during the playoffs when their team gets eliminated, or if you don't make the playoffs, obviously. And then you get about 3 weeks off in this lull, and they're kind of combining it because they got no time off. Now, the new guys, Sean Desai, DJ Elliott, some of those guys, you know, hey, they're getting a nice little break.
Yeah, I mean, you know, this is kind of typical Eagles, right? I mean, since Nick Sirianni's been here, these guys have not had to really dig too deep in the off season. And that's not to say they're not working hard, but you know, this organization, they've established a trend in how they want to protect their guys and how they want to handle how much grass time they get. You know, they want to regulate the amount of contact that they're having, you know, amongst themselves. And I can't really argue with their process because the results were them having all 22 starters in the Super Bowl, right? You know, but at the same time, you know, I've always been a proponent of repetition, you know, breeds confidence, right? And when you have these young guys, especially, you know, the rookies like Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Kelly Ringo, you know, Sidney Brown, Tanner McKee, Moro Jomo, you know, all those guys, Tyler Steen, you know, even the undrafted guys, right? I believe, especially with this new CBA, it's kind of made it hard for young guys to really get that quality time to really hone their skills as much as they would like. Now, you know, there are more ways to hone your skills, you know, outside of the building. A lot of guys have their personal trainers, you know, their personal guys on their staffs. They help them with techniques, so on and so forth. But you know, when it comes to understanding your scheme and understanding what your coach is asking of you, you know, I feel like a lot of these young guys, especially again with the new CBA, you know, they're kind of being, you know, sold short with the full NFL experience, especially with them trying to learn what the coach is asking of them.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've been pretty above board that I don't, you know, I just mentioned the long list of veteran players that weren't there, and whether it's Slay or Reddick or Bradbury or Graham or Cox, AJ, Kelsey, Lane, on and on and on. You know, I don't think it matters a hoot. I don't think those guys need this, to be honest. But with the younger players, yeah, I think it matters. And you know, the Eagles have sort of looked at the current landscape and, you know, made a decision that, hey, we don't have the time. Essentially, what it boils down to is we don't have the time to prepare like we used to be able to prepare in the old days with Andy Reid. So if you can't prepare like you want anyway, why not get to week one as healthy as possible? That is their whole philosophy. And I think they're right about it. And then you sort of have that glorified 2-3 game period where you're still making mistakes, whether you want to call it extended preseason. And then you start to hit your stride. I think that's where the Eagles are. And by the way, I think they're right in making that decision. But I do think it hurts the younger players. But that's everywhere. I mean, there's no, and Jody and I have this argument all the time. There's no, and I think Mike Garafolo's on our show every once in a while says it, and I stole it from Mike, so I'll give Mike credit. We don't play football in the spring. They're not playing football. They're not practicing football. So it's hard for me to say, oh, insert name of team. And there's only, by the way, one team that can say they were better than the Eagles last year in a meaningful fashion. And even that, I would say the Eagles were the better team. They just happened to lose the game, but in Super Bowl 57. But there's only one team. Even if you wanted to fall to the best team won, fine. There's still only one team. All these other teams practiced more than the Eagles last year. Didn't work for them. So
Yeah,
I got to give the Eagles the benefit of the doubt on that part of it.
Yeah, again, you can't really argue with the results. Nick Sirianni spoke on Quez Watkins today at his press conference. I know we spoke about Quez Watkins last week when we were talking about OTAs, But I want to play a little game with you, John, before we get out of here, as it pertains to Quez Watkins, and also as it pertains to a few different narratives that's going on with the Philadelphia Eagles. Nick Sirianni essentially praised Quez Watkins so far throughout this offseason. He's saying that, he knows that, there's pressure on him. So, again, I want to play a little game with you called All Day or No Way. Essentially, another variation of buy or sell. I'm going to give you a situation or a scenario, and you're going to tell, and honestly, in honor of the football 24/7 idea being the fact that we're giving you football all day and every day. All day means you're buying. No way means you're selling. So I want to give you a few scenarios, and you're going to tell me if this is all day or no way. So I mentioned Quez Watkins, right? Quez Watkins has his best year statistically with the Philadelphia Eagles in 2023. All day or no way. And again, before you go, really quickly, I know you're an objective guy.
Yeah.
And I want you to remain objective. But I also want you to dive a little bit deeper into that childlike wonder you had a long, long ago, right? I want you to
that's tough.
I want you to speak from the heart right now, okay? Quez Watkins has his best year statistically with the Eagles, all day or no way.
Boy, I don't like the concrete. I'm gonna say no way because I don't, Olamide Zaccheaus is here. So maybe his targets get down a little bit, but then all you need is one injury and it's the exact opposite. But if AJ and Devontae are healthy, I'm gonna go no way because it's not needed. And Olamide probably takes a little bit away from what Quez was getting.
I feel that. And again, I don't want you to feel like you're locked into these answers. This is fluid, okay? This is fluid. Anything can happen on any given day, like you said, injuries, so on and so forth. So many circumstances have to take shape, right? So I don't want you to feel like you're locked into this. This is just a little fun exercise.
Yeah, I'll just say that caveat. I'm assuming no injuries, and if no injuries, right. Yeah. I mean, and by the way, Quez had a chance to make a play today. Nick Sirianni, kind of fell on his sword for him, and he didn't track the football, and he dropped the football. So there you go.
Oh, well, that probably answered our question right there. All right, let's go to the next one. Jordan Davis will play at least 40% of the defensive snaps all day or no way.
That's a good number. I'm going to say, as of now, I'm going to say all day. The only concern I have with Jordan, because remember Linval's not here any longer. I don't know if they have a real backup at his position. And, I don't think people understand his position. I say it all the time. Nose tackle, one technique, zero technique, shade technique, whatever you want to call it. And people say, well, they have Fletcher Cox down. Different positions. Those guys are 3 technique, 4 eye, sometimes some 5. As far as the nose tackle, the shade guy, that's going to be Jordan Davis. Maybe Noah Elise is Christian's brother, Noah Ellis. I always say Elise with them because they have the extra S. He's back. He tore his Achilles last year. His big 350-pound guy was out there practicing for the first time. Maybe he can do it. And then the second thing I worry about Jordan is conditioning. He's a big guy. And not used to playing a lot because Georgia was so talented. So I got to see him do it, but I think that's the plan, is to get him out there. And 40's a good number. Wouldn't be surprised if he's a little bit under, but I'll say he hits 40%.
Okay, that's reasonable. All right, the next one. Sidney Brown will be the starting safety, one of the starting safeties by week 1. All day or no way?
Yeah, I'm going all day with that because I just don't think the Eagles are talented enough at safety. And I think they're going to, at the end of the day, they're going to throw them into the deep end of the pool and say, let's go, man. We need your talent. We need your athleticism out there. And He'll make some mistakes, but the best way to do something is jump in and do it. And, maybe by the second half of the season, getting those startup costs out of the way, maybe it works out for the Eagles.
All right. Nakobe Dean will lead the Eagles in tackles by the end of the season. All day or no way?
Oh, all day times 2.
Okay. All right, John.
That's
see, I'm not used to you. I know you're objective, but I'm not used to you having this much conviction.
Well, that's what the defense is designed for. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean he's performing well. I mean,
that's a good point.
Defense is designed to funnel everything to the linebackers. I mean, those guys are the ones who are supposed to make the tackles. It's Jordan Davis who's supposed to tie up the blockers so those linebackers can make the tackles. Nakobe's going to be the 3-down linebacker. He's going to be out there every play, again, barring injury. If he doesn't lead this team in tackles, something's wrong. Something's really wrong. If he doesn't lead this team in tackles and he's out there, you got issues. This defense is designed for him to lead the Eagles in tackles.
All right, the final one. And I know this is something we kind of talked about earlier in the show. But again, I want you to just roll the dice on this one. I want you to humor me a little bit. Tyler Steen beats out Cam Jurgens for the starting right guard spot. All day or no way?
I'm going to go no way. I know Stout too well. He's going to, as I said, Cam would have to show up in the summer, have really bad summer. I mean, a really bad summer. It's not anything against Tyler Steen versus, you say, what's the difference between Tyler Steen, who's the 65th pick, and Sidney Brown, who's 66, position. They have somebody. Cam Jurgens was the 51st pick. He's expected to be a good player. Safety, they paid Terrell Edmonds what they paid him, which is not much. Contracts aren't everything, but they tell you a lot. Reed Blankenship, great story. But he was undrafted. He doesn't have Sidney Brown's athletic traits, to say the least. So they don't have the high-level prospect at safety that they have at guard. And I think that's the difference between those two players.
Fair enough. So as we begin to close the show, John, I got to ask you, man, again, you have this little time off between now and training camp. Yeah, you got any vacation plans lined up?
Football 24/7, baby.
Oh, I like what you did there.
I go down the shore a little bit when I get a chance. But yeah, man, we got to do the show every day. And I got to do Sports Illustrated stuff, and I got to, it doesn't stop for us, Tone. We don't get the 5 weeks off.
Hey, listen, man, we got to get it somehow. Listen, you guys have been locked in on Football 24/7 with John McMullen. I'm your guy, Tone DeShields II. This has been a really good show, man. We got a lot of insight from John when it comes to that right guard battle. And also, we were able to, kind of push John to the edge a little bit. We kind of were able to get John to, lean left or lean right, on some topics. And, I appreciate him. I appreciate him for being a good sport.
By the way, one fan said, "Where is Devin Allen?" He is in Paris about to run track. He's running hurdles in Europe. So that's why he's missed OTA.
really quickly. The Devin Allen story, it was just a good story. He's not going to touch any grass, come week 1 at all. It's, no shade towards him. But again, I think that was just one of those, one of those stories that, it's fun to talk about, fun to entertain. He had that bomb touchdown against the Browns in the preseason last year. But, I think Devin Allen understands where he is in the pecking order on his Eagles roster, and I think he's really going towards the money. He's probably making more money running track than playing football.
Well, when he said when he signed with the Eagles originally, he said, he was going to give up track, and he hasn't given up track. So I think that tells you something. But he's more than, he played at Oregon before he went in.
Right.
He's great, obviously, hurdler, world class to say the least, Olympian. But he was a football player. He caught, I think it was 7-8 touchdowns at Oregon the season before he decided to make track number one. It's not like he's a track guy trying to play football. He knows how to play football. He hadn't played it in a while,
right?
But he knows, and he played the position at a really high level for a really good college program.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
So he's more than just a track guy. But yeah, I would think to go where he wants to go, he'd have to give up track, and I don't think he's given up track. So, and the second part is, I think he would, in a different era, and he would be a really good kick returner, maybe could develop into that, but that you don't even need that anymore with what they've done to the kickoff return.
Yeah, I understand what they were trying to do with, as far as health and, trying to, I guess, litigate injuries, or however you describe it, right? I know you always say, what's the word you use? Is it litigate or
legislate?
Legislate. There it is.
Yeah, you can't
legislate. You really can't. And the NFL loves to they love to pretend like health is the number one priority, but this is football at the end of the day, right?
No, it's about, and from their perspective, from the league's perspective, it's about legal indemnification and the fact that pending legal cases about safety issues and future, even more future litigation, they want to be able to point to these types of things and say, see,
we're trying.
We care about the players, even though there's the blatant hypocrisy of Thursday games and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. So again, make sure you guys smash that like button. Make sure you guys are locked in on JAKIB Sports, and also make sure you guys check out the JAKIB Sports website. There you'll find writing from John McMullen and our other contributors as well, like Joe Santoliquito, I believe, and Paul Domowitch during the season. So smash that like button. Stay engaged. That's JAKIB Sports.com. He's John McMullen. I'm your guy, Tone DeShields II. It's been fun. Take care, you guys.
Go for the pulls and the pools. Go for the oohs and the ahs. Go for the bubbles and the bubbly. Go for the story and the stories. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.